Hi, I'm Professor Paul Tipton and I'm Clinical Director of Tipton Training. Success. Okay, that's a good one. Good place to start. I think to be successful, you need to have determination, number one. I think you've got to really work hard, number two. And I think you've got to have the desire to really do something in dentistry. I also looked for a role model. And I think it's important in today's dentistry that you find yourself a role model. My role model I found was Michael Wise. He was specialist in prosthodontics, restorative dentistry. He also taught clinical dentistry to dentists throughout the country. And I found him as my ideal mentor. I knew I needed to upskill. And one of the hard parts of dentistry is upskilling, because what you're taught at university, dental school, sometimes doesn't reflect in the real world. So I found Mike Wise and I saw that he did some 12-month restorative dentistry courses. So I decided to go on some of his courses. First course I did was in 1984 and I did a one-year course with him. He then became my mentor. I went on to do a second year course in 85, a third year course in 86, and upon his prompting and advice I went down to the Eastman and did my master's degree starting in 87, finishing in 1989. Following my master's degree, I came back to Manchester and set up my first private practice. That was again 89 to 90. I think the main elements for success as a dentist are probably threefold. First of all, you need knowledge. Knowledge is absolute power. The more knowledge you have, the more understanding of the subject you have, the more you can do in dentistry. I think the second one is hand-eye coordination. And it's very important that as a dentist, you need to be able to use those hands, those skills, and be able to coordinate eyes and hands together at the same time. Very important for preparation, restorative dentistry. Third part is business. You've got to have an eye on business. You've got to understand how business works, marketing. You've got to understand how interpersonal relationship skills can help build a practice for you. And I think fourth now, which is more recent, is qualifications. I think you need to set yourself out there as different to everybody else. I've upskilled, yes. I've got the knowledge, yes. But I can prove it by having a further qualification. I think it's important for students when they qualify as dentists that they realise that they've been taught the basics. University is there to qualify them as dentists. It's a little bit like driving. When you pass your driving test, you are able to go on the road and drive, but you're not an accomplished driver. So I think it's very important that they realise that there's still a lot more to learn. And we at Tipton Training are there to help those dentists go through that process. I first moved from NHS to private dentistry in 1987-89, once I finished my master's degree. Before that, I'd been working at various practices in Doncaster, Sheffield, Manchester. My motivation to move into private dentistry was, initially I wanted to come back to Manchester. I'd been in Sheffield for a period of time and I saw a job advertised in Manchester. And I wanted to come back to play a little bit of cricket locally, and so I came back, applied for the job, had an interview and got this job in the centre of Manchester. The practice was 50% NHS, 50% private. My principal did all the private work. I did most of the NHS with a little bit of private work. Several years later, a couple of years later, the principal decided he wanted to emigrate, and so he gave me the opportunity to buy the practice. First thing happened was I bought the practice and I took over all of his private patients. And immediately I found I was out of my comfort zone. Those private patients really wanted a higher level of skill, a higher level of dentistry than I could provide, and I felt very, very uncomfortable. So at that stage, straight away, I knew I had to upskill and I had to go on courses. I started my first training course in 1990, just after I'd qualified at the Eastman. Terrifying experience. My first training course, my mentor was Mike Wise, and so I took a lot of my experiences with him running these courses, and I had a group of 8 dentists with me that very first training course. I was so nervous that I wouldn't even stand in front of the projector, in front of the screen, so I had to stand behind so that nobody could see me, and gave the course that way. Slowly over the years, obviously, I've got a little bit better, or I hope I have, and now I'm quite happy to chat, educate, teach, lecture to whether it's 8 people or 3,000 people. When I first did my training courses and started teaching dentists, I was the young guy in the room. Everybody else was older than me. And at some stage, I don't know why, how it happened, but some stage over the last 25, 30 years, it's morphed into me now being the old guy and all the dentists being a lot younger. I can't remember when it happened, but it happened. I think that there's several books that young dentists today should read. The first one, or the first 2, are by Schillingberg. The first one's called Fundamentals of Fixed Prosthodontics, and that's a book that really goes through prosthodontics from A to Z. It's the Bible, if you like, of prosthodontics, and I think it's a book that everybody should read. Every restorative dentist, every young dentist that wants to do well in restorative dentistry. The second book is again by Schillingberg, called Fundamentals of Tooth Preparation. And tooth preparation is really, really important in dentistry. It's how a lot of other dentists judge you. It's how laboratory technicians judge you. And if you don't have that good hand-eye coordination and aren't able to do good tooth preparations, then that can show in the final result. You can lack confidence, and it's one of the key elements to you being a successful dentist. So much so that we at Tipton Training have got a phantom head course which we teach, and we teach those skills, all the different tooth preparation techniques, from veneers, full crowns, some of the more difficult partial crowns, Maryland bridges, normal fixed movable, fixed bridges, even to the more basics such as composites, porcelain onlays. We teach all these things on our course. I think especially is getting the hands and the eyes coordinated together, and we have a special emphasis on doing that. The first course that we teach is the restorative course, and that one's very much based upon Schillingberg's Fundamentals of Fixed Prosthodontics. And we go through things such as occlusion, tooth preparation, veneers, composites, adhesion, bridge design, endo, perio, treatment planning, and lots more. I think the single biggest challenge that dentists have today is probably meeting patients' expectations. I think patients have become more savvy. They understand a lot more. Litigation has come in a lot more. And so dentists really need to understand treatment options and treatment planning. Something that we're very big on at Tipton Training is treatment planning. We spend a lot of time, and it's a part of dentistry that seems to be neglected on a lot of other courses. Occlusion is the other major aspect of the restorative course, and I think it's very, very big aspect, and most dentists don't understand occlusion. Unfortunately, it's not taught very well at dental school. Very often it's something that might be one lecture, or I've heard students are told you'll learn this when you get out into the big wide world as a practicing dentist. But occlusion is dentistry. If you don't understand occlusion, you don't understand dentistry. You cannot do good quality dentistry without understanding occlusion. Occlusion makes things work. If you don't get the occlusion right, things fail. And unfortunately, if things fail, then you lack confidence. You don't do that job again. The amount of work and the diversity of the work that you do decreases. And of course, you've then got the potential for patient complaints and litigation. And that's something that is obviously high on the agenda of all young dentists at the moment, the General Dental Council and the amount of litigation that's flying around. So occlusion is a huge topic, and we go into it in a large amount of detail. Tipton Training's morphed now into an international brand, not just a national brand. And that's been a lot of hard work. If you want to create a national brand, then that's hard work in itself. But you've got to create a national brand before you can create an international brand. The international part must always come later. So it's hard work, it's desire, it's determination, it's a lot of long nights, it's a lot of weekend work. And it's also going through, obviously, everything else that I discussed earlier that makes you successful. It's having the knowledge, it's having the desire, it's having hand-eye coordination to make yourself a good clinical dentist, because if you're not a good clinician, you can't teach, and hence you can't go on your international lecture circuit, etc. It's understanding interpersonal relationship skills so you can build your brand and build your business. It's also about developing a team and building a team. And to be successful, you need to have successful partners and successful people around you. At Tipton Training, we've built that team. So we have other clinicians that work with us, other teachers, the top teachers in the profession. We have lab technicians that work with us. And lab technician work is a really important part of dentistry. And again, it's a part that I feel that young dentists don't really understand. They don't get any training. But to be a successful dentist, again, you have to understand those partners that you work with. And the dental technician can do so much to make your work look good, or alternatively look poor. If you don't understand what he does, you can't contribute to that part. One of the major parts that I feel of my success was when I did my master's degree down at the Eastman. Over 2 years, we had to do our own lab work. So we completed about 50 units of crown and bridge work on patients, and we had to make all those units ourselves. Diverse, such as gold crowns, diagnostic wax-ups, Marylands, bonded crowns, veneers, we made them all in the lab. We stayed behind from 7 till 9 every night and did that work. Obviously under the tutorage of some very experienced technicians, but that's essential to know the link between technician and clinician. Brexit's there and it's created a lot of uncertainty, but there's always uncertainty. There's always going to be something there that comes after Brexit. The best way, I feel, to get over that uncertainty, to get round it, is to get further qualifications. The more qualified you are, the higher level of skill everybody knows you have, and to upskill and get those qualifications is, I think, essential in an uncertain world. Dentistry is a tough profession, and everybody needs to relax and take some time out. Okay, I've got 4 kids, I've got a wife, I've got 4 dogs, so they occupy an awful lot of my time. But at the same time, I enjoy my travel. I enjoy driving cars. I've had a lot of Porsches over the years, but the biggest passion throughout my life has probably been, apart from my family and dentistry, it's been cricket. And cricket's taken me all through the world. I used to be a professional cricketer with Lancashire. For many years ago, I was then semi-professional with Cheshire, and I've met a lot of wonderful people over the years. With Lancashire, I played alongside some household names now. David Lloyd, who's obviously known at Sky nowadays, he was my captain at Lancashire. I played with Clive Lloyd, who was an all-time great West Indian cricketer. Farouk Engineer, an all-time great Indian opening batsman and wicketkeeper. Michael Holding I played with. And I've played against quite a few useful players. Dennis Liddy for once, I played against when I was in Australia. So it was quite tough playing against him. Cricket is the source of a little bit of hand-eye coordination, but really, for me, if I look back, where I developed my hand-eye skills was many years ago when I was a young boy, and there was a game out called Subbuteo. Not many people know about it now, although there are still Subbuteo championships around the world. and these were little tiny figures, almost like toy soldiers. And I got some Subbuteo figures, football team figures, and I wanted my football team to be Juventus. And so I took them and I used to paint little black stripes on their white kit. And I think that painting little toy soldiers when I was young, I think that probably contributed to having a decent hand-eye coordination.